Joining me now from our nation's capital, Brendan Buck. He worked for former House Speaker Paul Ryan. He also has a podcast called Control, focused on issues that will define Congress next year. So we've got a lot to talk about. Good morning to you, Brendan, as always. So Trump's announcement tonight, any chance he delays what we anticipate him saying about 2024?
Well, you can never really be for sure with Donald Trump, of course. It wouldn't surprise me if he announced his intent to announce at some point in the future, just to keep us on the edge of our seat. But I think it's pretty clear that Donald Trump is going to run for president again. I've always assumed he was going to. He loves being on the stage. But the reality is that he's entering this new phase in very different political standing. There are a lot of people, not just in Washington, but conservatives all across the country who are starting to wonder, is he still the person that we should be getting behind? A consensus that I haven't seen in quite a long time. Now, that does not mean that that is going to discourage him. And I think he has shown that he doesn't really care what people in Washington think. In fact, gets a lot of his power by being against what people in Washington think. So I think he is going to be running for president again. The question is, are there enough people out there who are ready to turn the page and actually get in the ring with him and challenge him for the nomination?
Yeah, that is the question. And he owns the oxygen in the room always, except Mike Pence is making the rounds. You've seen that, Brendan. He says he's praying about his next political move and whether or not he would run. My question to you, should he run, and does he have a chance against Trump?
I'm expecting Mike Pence to run, and I think that's great. I think it's a very difficult balancing act for someone like Mike Pence, who wants to project a record of success.
Also, some of the races that have been called here in the last few days that have made a big difference, starting in Arizona. Mark Kelly defeats Blake Masters. Is that Senator Mitch McConnell's fault, as Blake Masters and Senator Ted Cruz have suggested?
Of course not, and I think that's ridiculous. Mark Kelly, for one thing, is an incredibly good candidate. He's an astronaut. He's husband to a beloved figure, Gabby Giffords. He was going to be very difficult to beat in the first place. No one has done more to try to win these Senate races than Mitch McConnell. Hundreds of millions of dollars that he and affiliated groups have thrown at some of these races. The reality is we had a bunch of really bad candidates, and they were candidates that Mitch McConnell warned against. And he said, if you go with these Trump-aligned candidates, we are putting our Senate majority or the potential to get a Senate majority at risk. And a lot of the people who are trying to give Mitch McConnell trouble now are the ones who were boosting those very types of candidates, those more extreme candidates that voters said they didn't want. So I have a hard time taking very seriously some of these people who want to lay the blame at Mitch McConnell. I really just think this is people who are most, the people whose wing of the party they represent, who are most at blame for the poor election showing, trying to cast blame somewhere else. And I am confident that Mitch McConnell will get another term as leader in the Senate.
Get another term, but do you think he'll delay the leadership vote today, given the fact we're still waiting on Georgia?
I don't imagine he will, because I don't think he needs to. If there was a real problem, he would push back. But I think this is just a few loud voices with no real plan to take him down. And so why delay the inevitable?
Let me talk about the House with you here, Brendan, for a second. Still up in the air. The speaker position will be up for grabs. It's also top of mind. Matt Gaetz said that he would not vote for Kevin McCarthy. Neither would, quote, the critical mass. What does that tell you about the state of the Republican Party, and what does everybody have against McCarthy at this point?
Other than maybe Matt Gaetz, I don't think this is really about Kevin McCarthy. I think what you're seeing in the House is you have a handful of members who want relevance. And they see that with a very narrow majority, any one of them has incredible leverage over whether it's the speaker or leadership in general, because if they don't vote with the team, everything falls apart. And there are some people there who just are opportunists. And that's what I think what you're seeing at this point. I do think Kevin McCarthy is going to get there. We're going to have potentially a 3-4 seat majority. And at some point, this act is going to wear pretty thin with the rest of their colleagues.
It'd be tough to get things done. How do Republicans find a path forward to unity under where things stand right now with such slim margins?
Well, sometimes having a narrow margin can breed unity. I think it's natural right now that there are a lot of people who are blowing off some steam. They're frustrated with how it went. But at some point, you got to get things done. And you realize that you don't have a lot of room for disagreement. Nancy Pelosi, for example, only had a 5-seat majority last time, and she did a really good job of playing to the team. As much as Republicans are difficult to manage and we are much more unruly than Democrats have been in recent years, there is always a sentiment that they want to be on the same page. And I've been in so many closed-door conference meetings where they all say very proudly that they're proud to be on this team and they want to be on the same page. And sometimes when you have to be, you can be. And so I think that there's a chance that they're going to rally together and wave the banner of unity a little more than people expect. But you don't have a big margin to begin with, so you kind of have to do that if you want to get anything done.
And do you believe that former President Trump can bring Republicans together?
I don't, but that's a different question than what motivates the House Republican Conference. And I think that you're probably going to see a conference where he is still pretty popular. But like Mike Pence said, I think if you leave it to the voters, the American people, they will probably be ready to turn the page. And so that's what I'll be looking for.
Thank you for watching. Go to newsnationnow.com to find NewsNation on your television provider. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.